هاتي ادخل بس هذه ولا هي بحط الاي دي نمبر. الرقم عشان نفتحه. ايش
Just quickly asking Janani and Chitra, all our panelists are here except
Could you please repeat that, please?
Yes, just wanted to check, did we go ahead and start? Do you do an introduction first, or how does that work?
Dr. Ramamani, you can please begin the session actually. We're still waiting for two more panelists, and as and when they join, we will promote them.
Perfect,
But you
perfect.
can begin.
الباسورد تاعك الجيميل تاعك هذا
Okay, so and do we mute and unmute ourselves, or will you be managing that?
You can mute and unmute yourselves. You will have the rights to do that, so you can.
Okay, and what about the speaker view? Would you do you operate that, or should we?
We will be handling that.
Okay, so we can go into gallery view, for example.
Oh yes, that's right.
Okay. Very good. Just a second, I'll just send a word to the last speaker. Okay, great. I'm going to go into gallery view. So we are ready to begin right on time with our session, which is extremely exciting because it's a session where we are looking at the transformative power of education from the perspective of women leaders who are really on the forefront of addressing these challenges across all continents. We couldn't possibly have a better panel than this to do so, because we are not simply sharing our perspectives and our visions for the future of education from an academic perspective, from a perspective of what we would like to see, but really every one of the women leaders on this panel is going to share from her direct experience in their respective contexts, how have they faced the challenges, and actually how they are making this vision come true already in what they do. So with this, I'm going to start to briefly introduce our panel. The way in which we will flow, because we have exactly 1 hour, is I will first turn the floor to Pilar Alvarez Lasso, who has been working since 2010 with UNESCO, building on a very distinguished career as one of the, a media figure, a political journalist at the forefront in Mexico, and then was invited to be the Assistant Director General for Humanities and Social Sciences, if I got that right, at UNESCO, and then served as a head of mission in several countries, including most recently Haiti, before that many years in Costa Rica, and also in Uzbekistan. Pilar, you'll be giving us a bit of a global perspective of your vision for the future of education, briefly, and then we would turn to hear our 3 women panelists who are already here from 3 very different contexts, focusing on very different issues, but each time with this very holistic, transformative, humanizing, and pioneering approach, or paradigm shifting approach, I should really say. We will go from Pilar, we will zoom into India, where I happen to find myself, unfortunately, a bit too far to be sitting side by side with Sujata, but we will go to Dr. Sujata Khandekar, who will tell us about the remarkable experience she's had over the last decades, more than 3 decades, with the women in what are called the slums, but really the grassroots women in Mumbai and across. She'll explain the many regions they work on and how they are now, based on that experience, creating a grassroots leadership academy. She will explain more about that. From there, we will zoom to Jerusalem, to East Jerusalem, where we will meet Zahira Kamal, one of the women's leaders of that country, who has been the first Minister of Women's Affairs in Palestine and had a revolutionary approach to how she set up that ministry, but has also been the first woman to be the Secretary General of a political party, the Fida Party, and has been an activist for peace and freedom all of her life, as well as a women's leader and an educator, a physics teacher with UNRWA to start with. And then we zoom over to Brazil, to Thais Corral in Sinal, so that we bring in the environmental perspective. And Thais, who's been a leader of the women and environment movement, was leading the Women's Caucus already in Rio in 1992, and has led many different environmental and women's movements in Brazil, and over the last decade has set up a revolutionary program called Sinal with youth and business leaders, which she will tell us about. So we will hear from them, turn back to Pilar to share how does this resonate with your experience, both from Mexico, but around the world, and a UNESCO perspective. And we hope we will be able to get a few perspectives also from others who join us on this session. Currently, just to fill you in, Munira Yusufzada, my very dear friend and colleague from Afghanistan, the former Deputy Minister for Defense, unfortunately has a small health crisis. She's at the doctor's with her daughter. She's hoping that she can make it back on time or get online somewhere on time, but obviously her daughter's health is a priority. And Mumtaz Sheikh, who is one of the grassroots leaders of the Women's Federation and Koro, together with Sujata, is also unwell. In this case, she's been treating her mother, who was unwell and fell unwell herself. So all of the things that go with women's leadership. So with that, and no further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, dear Pilar, to get us started.
Thank you, dear Rama. Thank you for this initiative. I'm privileged to be here with these distinguished personalities, with Zahira. Nice to see you again, Zahira. Thais, Sujata, hopefully Munira, and Chopin. Thank you for the support. Thank you really for this invitation in participating in this 5th International Conference on Future Education. And what it is special is that this is a collaborative thought space that is being convened by the World Academy of Art and Science and the World Consortium for Universities. Thank yous do not stop there. Also, I think that the Cadmus journal paper, A New Paradigm in Higher Education for Sustainable Development and Human Security, is a thought piece that inspires to think ahead, to think with anticipation on what education lays ahead of us. And looking into futures, as former Assistant Director General for UNESCO, regardless of what the program says, I am a former ADG. I'd like to bring to the table this new social contract for education that UNESCO has put forward to member states and that has just been adopted. And I will be very brief, pointing to some points that are, I think, very relevant for the discussion. I've been listening to some of the, well, to the opening, of course. Greetings to my dear former boss, Irina Bokova. And also to some of the debates. So many of the things have already been told in this international conference. And I will focus maybe with the provisions of being focused on, and maybe partial, on things that I have noted that would be very important for my own reflection. And if somebody else is also feeling that this resonates would be absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to start by sharing what I just saw that should be reminded or maybe framed for our conversation. Education is no longer what has been in the last centuries. Now we are facing completely a paradigm that is in the making. Where, when, what, how, why, all the 5 W's of any journalist that are also relevant in research, well, now are relevant to think about the sustainability of education and how education looks in the future. And UNESCO called a new social contract for UNESCO, a new social contract for education. And it explains that constructing a new social contract means exploring new ways of thinking about education, knowledge, and learning. These three parts are very important: education, knowledge, and learning. Our difficulties are not only the result of limited resources and means. Our challenges also stem from why and how we educate and we find ways to organize learning. Very briefly, this new social contract for education is anchored in 2 foundational principles: the right to education and a commitment to education as a public society endeavor and a common good. This right of education must be expanded to include the right to quality education throughout life. This is very important because when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was passed, and I am speaking here to people that are very familiar and knowledgeable on it, that very clearly say that the right to education did not have or was not framed as precise as it is now to include the right to quality education and throughout life. So lifelong learning becomes something that to be discussed in this panel and of course has been in the conference. Now, what is throughout life long life learning? It has been interpreted before the right to education only as the right to schooling for children and youth, almost vastly, not only. Now, going forward, the right to education must assure education of all ages in all areas of life. Because we are all familiar, key disruptions and emerging transformations are spreading change in areas that are overlapping. And here again, I cite the UNESCO report on futures of education or the new social contract for education. These 4 overlapping areas are environmental change, Thais is going to also speak on it, technological acceleration, governance, and social fragmentation, that on one side, and new worlds of work. So coming from this perspective of education as a common good, we come to something that is very familiar in the international sciences, international relations, which is interdependence. Again, the zoom in is now that interdependence is not only about states, it is also about nations, therefore it is also about individuals, it is about communities. That is the way that education will continue, has been, especially in the 19th and 20th century. We are now challenging it all together. Education has been the way we organize teaching and learning throughout life and has played a foundational role in the transformation of human societies. Education, here I cite the report, education is how we organize the intergenerational cycle of knowledge transmission and co-creation. Yes, of course, also it's about also social transformations, inclusivity. It's about how we see the world and how we live in the world. So going very quickly with some notes on areas relevant for higher education, which is the in the context of the conference and of this panel, which is very much based on women, with women. But I would like to bring three areas. Aging, we are in an era of extreme longevity. Before we spoke only about longevity, but now we are speaking about extreme longevity. It has an impact on higher education. The reskilling revolution that Davos also passed this full idea of what we will be facing with the new needs for skilling, upskilling, reskilling in order to be able to continue in the formal and many times in the informal work environment. The other important area is digital. That is completely paramount on how education is going to be rethought, not in this century, in this decade. And gender, it's not only about that gender is a cross-cutting area, but it is also how it can be, should be, must be relevant in the way we think education. And I will briefly go into these notes. So about aging. Education is a vector of growth. Population aging influences economic growth and labor force participation. In 2020, there was an estimated 727 million persons aged 65 years or over worldwide. This number is projected to more than double by 2050, reaching over 1.5 billion persons. That means 16% of world population will be over 65 years old. Right now, we are about 10% if we are taking into consideration as well people over 60, not only 65. So I found this idea of Catherine Petrie, maybe other people have also thought of it, but I'm taking it, which is the minister for the idea of creating in the countries, which is not about creating, it is simply the detonating idea, a ministry of long life learning. It is incredible to think from the perspective, again, education has been seen many times, and also we look at it because it is part of, it is the right of education, and it is, of course, the political, the policies, the social policies in all countries, that there is a very important part for children and for youth and for young adults. But now that time is coming for people, adults age 60 and over. There are some people that even say that recareering should be as early as 35 or 40 years of old. So the labor force at the global level is estimated to continue the current upward trend in the coming decades. However, we are facing other phenomena, automation, artificial intelligence. Therefore, we are looking at a new way of including, and I say it with a lot of care, including older adults into education, because it is 10% of the current population is a lot, and 16% or 20, even some are saying 22% of the global population will be of people that would be living with the baby boomers, might be heading to at least another 30 years of career life. And certainly it is necessary to look at from the perspective of how the social contract integrates older people. Living longer means working longer, means opening new opportunities for education. However, at the same time, there is speaking of new opportunities, there is also age-based discrimination. One of the main barriers faced by older persons in employment and in access to higher education, and not only higher education, but I'm focusing on it, is age-based discrimination. And it manifests itself in the form of individual, institutional, systemic, or structural practices. Inadequate access to lifelong learning systems means that exclusion will continue. Certainly, training and access to formal and informal learning to everyone at all phases of life, from early childhood education through adult learning, should encompass access to training opportunities for older persons that can hamper their ability to continue working or find new employment. Many skills become obsolete in the rapid changing labor market, and that's true for the youth as well. So the demand for skilling, reskilling, upskilling grows. Yes, I'm going to finish.
Okay, great. I was going to say, because this is the perfect point, actually, the fact that you actually highlighted this issue as the first of your three. If you would be willing to hold the other 2 points, because I think they could come in very well when you've heard the other speakers. But I think this is a very, very good framing you've given us. So please hold on to the 2 other points, which are very, very key. But I'm very happy you began with this point, because I think actually what, as we move on to Sujatha, she's actually going to show exactly this, about how this idea of lifelong learning, this idea of anyone at any point in that life cycle can be a transformative learner, educator with collaborative knowledge. So thank you very much, because I really feel in this session we are we are continuing to craft together that social contract. So with this, I move over to you, Sujatha, and ask you your experience, your vision, and your experiences for the future of education. Thank you so much, Pilar, for starting us off on such a good note.
Yeah, thank you, Pilar, and thank you, Rama, and all of the panelists, and for this opportunity to share the experience and think together, co-thinking, part of that. And actually, I want to bring into this discussion the context of marginalized women that we have been working for last so many years, the women that are left behind. I mean, actually, these are women who are excluded from the realm of education for centuries. And it is just the societal perception, the powerfuls in the society thought that they don't have ability to learn, to get educated, neither they need to learn, because then they took the reins in their hand of thinking and acting on behalf of these marginalized people. That's how this the communities and the women that I'm talking about are excluded from the realm of education. And actually the whole experience initially was situated in the lifelong learning that Pilar just mentioned. So we were working with adult education thing. And actually, I want to bring in story, of our work, how our understanding of education evolved over the process. Because we were working for adult education, started with the books that were given by government of Maharashtra, or state government, and took these books because we all, the organizers of this program, came from very middle class, upper class background, and we had our social baggage with them. And we thought it's so easy, actually tell people to the importance of adult education, give them books, and then your work is only supervision, whether they learn or not, whether they come to classes or not. But actually the demystification happened because adult education, adult literacy was not a felt need of women who were coming to classes. They didn't feel that was relevant. And in spite of many efforts, women didn't come to the classes. Actually, when we were exploring different ways of how we can connect women to the process of adult education, to the learning, actually we found that all women were getting subsidized ration, like kerosene, grain, sugar, etc., from government licensed shops. And there were a lot of corrupt practices happening in that realm of public distribution system. And women had a lot of grievances about that system. And then when we did a small survey, we could locate that there were 25 grievances or complaints that they wanted to lodge. And we also bumped across a rule in the system that if somebody writes a complaint in a complaint book, which is 24 hours in that ration shop, the officer has to come back to this person saying what action he or she has taken on that complaint. And nobody knew about this rule. I mean, people were absolutely ignorant. But then we thought actually writing a complaint needs skill to write and also courage to write, because all these shop owners were protected by local hooligans, gundas, mafias, etc., political party leaders. And then so we set aside the kits given by government, the literacy learning kits, and designed our own kits. So simple. The first lesson was writing wheat. The second lesson was writing sugar. The third lesson was writing kerosene. And the longer sentences were, the wheat is rotten, sugar is wet, I lost foam, kerosene in my foam, etc. All those 24, he abused me, the shop owner abused me. So all 24 complaints that women wanted to lodge were made part of comprehensive understanding in the literacy process. And I tell you, it was like a magic that happened. All literacy, and we explain what these writings can bring change in women's lives, how they can address their issue. And actually literacy classes were buzzed with this writing. We mobilized women class-wise. They went in groups together, started writing complaint in the complaint book, which had never ever happened. And that had in a way protected the nexus between the shop owners and the government officers and everybody that was associated. So the shop owners who were not paying heed to women and were abusing them started coming home to these women and saying, I can give you 1 month's advance ration, but don't write anything there. Actually, I think this was like an awakening of what words can do. And in spite of many efforts that we had done for so long, we couldn't connect women with the literacy because it was not relevant to what their needs were. The lesson we learned from this, and actually that gave credibility to the organization. I thought women understood why we are doing what we are doing and what we wanted to achieve through literacy. And actually, Coro became really a community participative organization since then. And I think what lessons we drew from this, because any intervention, education and educational intervention has to be relevant to people's life. There are two approaches to education. One is banking education. What was we doing? What we were doing? Like, irrespective of knowing what women's needs were, we were just trying to dump information after information on them, which was most often very irrelevant to them. And we never bothered. That was probably our arrogance of like, we know everything, like what these women need and what we should give them. So that was the arrogance. And so women responded negatively to that arrogance. And when they saw that the literacy learning is becoming relevant to their life changing, it is really in a way transformative to their lives, they didn't need external motivation. They just did that. And the lesson was also actually people want to change. There is a perception from outside that people in slums, people in low-income communities, actually they love inertia. They don't want to change. We realize that it is not that inertia, it is not the unwillingness, but it is helplessness stemming out of the powerlessness. That makes women to not to speak, not to say anything, not to think the way they want to think. And that builds the false consciousness, that builds the adopted consciousness. All socialization is directed towards building this false consciousness that you are nothing, you are no worth, kind of, you don't understand anything. That, and if any intervention that tries to deal with and address this fragmented sense of identity, then the trajectory has no limit. That was our learning. We also learned that it was not enough to give information, but it is important to give application of that information, a vehicle to actualize that information that will bring actual change. And we also learned that there resides power within in every person and every woman that just needs to get triggered. that just needs to get facilitated so that they understand and realize what lies within them, what is their latent potential. We mobilize people together for collective action so that they get strength, and then they can change their own environment. Based on this realization, then we designed a leadership program, which is called Grassroots Leadership Development Program, especially from marginalized community, but also especially for women within marginalized communities. The premises of this program are three premises. One is the initiative for change has to come from within an individual and within the marginalized communities. Second, solidarity is the biggest asset of marginalized people. Individuals cannot change their near context. There have to be collective action. So the whole program is really interwoven with a lot of collective actions. And the third premise is all such leaders need supportive nearest ecosystem to thrive. So how do you create that nearest ecosystem? So based on these three things, actually, we have developed, and we are doing this program for the last 12 years, which is a high impact program. I'll just give you an example of the impact of the program. A friend who was to be there on the call today, so on our conference today. So she came to this program in 2000 with acute marital violence, experience of acute marital violence, and she wanted to redress it. She came in the program, realized her potential, started working with other women. And in 2015, she figured in BBC's list of 100 most influential women working on violence against women. I think this is the trajectory. Or another friend who attempted suicide twice actually said at the end of the program that I'm now creating safe environment for girls and women in my community. So I think this is the trajectory. And if we see what are the underlying processes, why people see that, why people feel that, why people do that, I think the only answer is it is unlocking of power within. And we've been doing this for last 12 years with almost identical impact with every batch. But then our understanding of education also evolved. After doing this for 12 years, we realized that it's not enough only to work with the marginalized communities for their empowerment. It has to become a social need. People from outside grassroots should really understand the importance and significance of this knowledge, these lived realities, these experiences, and actually there's co-thinking needs to happen. So actually we are now working on Academy of Grassroots Leadership, which has two arms. One arm is, of course, empowerment, bottom-up empowerment, which we have been doing for the last 12 years, and really very impactfully, I think, because the impact that people have created in their own areas is incredible. But the other arm of that is building bridges between different elements of wider ecosystem. When I say different elements of wider system, it is academia, it is media, it is other larger NGOs and other developments, it is donors, all of them. How can we create bridges and actually facilitate the processes that they understand the lived experiences, the wisdom, the knowledge that lies at the grassroots? And how do we integrate this into the way they are thinking and acting in their own areas with their work? And actually here comes the question of what we are missing in the education. We talked of higher education, but I'm talking about the higher is very relative term, we all know. But even education, I'm talking from the section where even education is relative term, like what do you perceive as education? And what is missing is actually how do we look beyond us? There are two spectrums. I just talked about the education that is needed, that we tried at the spectrum, which is marginalized, but the spectrum that is privileged, that needs to understand their privileges, and actually should be willing to share those privileges. And I think every one of us is at different points in the journey, and understanding why I am at different point in the journey is a very hopeful position to be in. And actually the academy is facilitating this process, how both ends understand each other and look forward to co-create and collaborate. Thanks. I think I would stop here.
Gatha, this is fabulous. I mean, you've covered so much without even talking about some of the exceptional things, like how you brought CEOs from the US, the UK, to come and live and learn from your grassroots women leaders, or the way you did your own PhD with the co-researchers who were the grassroots women leaders who've gone on this trajectory, or how many of these grassroots women leaders have now entered politics and been elected to power, etc. But this was a super, which you put us right on the spot. And I think really building on this will be Zahira Kamal and the exceptional work that she has done together, this collaborative, transformative work in the context in Palestine and across the Middle East. So we turn to you, Zahira, and look forward to hearing you. Thank you so very much, Sujatha. That was so empowering to hear you.
Thank you.
Zahira? You're muted and we can't see you as yet, Zahira.
Yeah. Okay. Did you hear me now?
Perfect. We see
okay.
you.
We have something in common with each other. And there are some differences due to the region and the life of women in different regions. And here I want to say that thinking about the future challenges of education reminds me with a lot of initiatives that women organizations did and still doing it to meet the challenges in this region, which insist on that we are learning from different resources, not only through schools and universities. And there is no limits for age of education. It can continue for all of our lives. And I'm honored here to share with you some of the experiences that I have. As you know, this region had suffered from armed struggle for a long decades that led to killing of people, imprisonment, demolition of houses, increase of poverty, instability, and mass immigration of young people. Women's Studies Center was pioneer in taking responsibility to empower victimized women. Training programs were initiated, exploring their strong points, training them to speak out, opening new opportunities for them to travel and participate in conferences, sharing with other women their experiences. Such programs support women with tools and skills to stand up again and to be strong to face these challenges and help other women facing it. That experience was exchanged with women in organizations in Syria and Iraq. Increase of violence in the family and society. 34% of women in Palestine were subjected to one kind or more of violence in the family. Up to the 19th of the past century, that issue was considered as family issue. Women were shy to talk about it. They say that dirty laundry should not be hanged in front of the neighbors. Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling was established in 1992 to support women to speak out, encourages them to raise their voices, telling them that dirty laundry should be hanged in the sun, otherwise its filthy smell will spread over. Monitoring reports on family violence were used to call for family protecting laws to defend women and children from violence. In addition, women were provided with training programs on raising their awareness and the society about women's rights and the impact of violence on society. Palestinian government adopted family protection law, which was submitted by women organizations. The law considered the killing of women under what's called honor killing is a crime that should be punished by law. Third, availability and accessibility of education in its various stages. In the beginning of the 70s of the past century, the percentage of literate women did not exceed than 18%. Many of girls were not enrolled in school. To face this crucial problem, coordination with Birzeit University to initiate literacy programs and educational curriculums and motivate students through volunteer programs to teach in literacy classes. Women organizations opened literacy classes in villages and encouraged illiterate women to join it. These literacy programs helped in eradication of illiteracy in Palestine. Illiteracy between women dropped down from 82% in 1978 to almost 2% now. For job creation and unemployment eradication. Unemployment in Palestine is high at 30%, with 20% in West Bank and around 60% in Gaza, more than twice of the unemployment rate in the world. 500,000 new jobs are needed to accommodate new young workers. Women are the most suffering of unemployment in Palestine. Women are making 21% of paid manpower. Unemployment between educated women is higher. Women organizations provided unemployed women with skills and financial needs to start their own businesses through saving and lending programs. Asala for Credit and Development Company, which is a woman organization, was the pioneer organization in the region and prepare women to be productive and accountable and gave them loans and skills to be initiative and self-guidance. In order to cope with the rapid progress of technology, the Ministry of Women Affairs started a program called Tawasul. Tawasul means communication. And this was established in different governments to support women working in different governance on new technology and being able to access information. At the same time, Palestinian Women Committee opened mother schools to prepare mothers to cope with these changes and to be able to support and follow up their children's education and to guide them to access information. 6, bridging the gender gap between men and women in society. Ministry of Women Affairs was pioneer in developing guidelines, instructions for gender development, which include gender mainstreaming, gender planning and evaluation, gender education, and gender budgeting. Governmental and non-governmental employees were trained to implement these guidelines in their work. Reports were developed to measure the evolution of the status of women and to monitor the policies taken by the government to bridge the gender gap between men and women in the society. Women Studies Center faculty were trained to be trainers, and they still training women and men working in the government, private sector, and NGOs on these issues. 7, playing an active role in society and decision-making. Women's Affairs Technical Committee was pioneer in raising the issue of the need of women participation in leadership through establishing a campaign entitled "We Participated in the Struggle and We Want to Participate in Decision-Making." That campaign ended with the decision of a quota system that gives women 20% of the seats in the Legislative Council. Now, women organizations are calling for 30% at least of the seats in all levels of decision-making. Women are encouraged to run for municipal elections, and 3 of them became mayors. 8, developing community leaders who are able to make difference in their communities, which requires to be connected with the surrounding communicate with people to identify the problems faced by society and contributing to its solution. Palestinian Women's Center for Research and Documentation, in cooperation with the universities, developed action research and policy papers to be used with legislators and decision makers to develop policies and plans for bridging the gender gap. Action researches were discussed with women organizations and community leaders to be aware about equal opportunities in all actions and programs that they are implementing. 9, education as a catalyst for social changes and the upbringing of good citizens who can play an active role in her society. Women organization cooperation with youth organization were aware about the rapid social changes in values, tendencies, trends, customs, and traditions. In cooperation with media organizations, these changes were discussed in order to raise the awareness of people of these changes and to be adapted to, and to be able to distinguish between what is beneficial and what is harmful for them. 10. Lessons learned from COVID-19 epidemic. Certainly, education in non-traditional way will be the style of future education. COVID-19 epidemic may have been important in putting us in the face of future challenges. 2 years ago, students did not learn through face-to-face education at school or universities. Teachers were trained in non-face-to-face education and without the need for the classroom all the time. School teachers and university teachers help their students access online information, track their difficulties. Of course, there was differences between one teacher to the other, adapting themselves to their changes, but still they are learning. Some of them find some time to enroll to the second degree or third degree of education. Others were able to read about distance education, and some were enrolled in one course or more online education. Women organizations were trying their best to reach out to women in different areas and to use technology in training and discussing issues with their clients. Integration of face-to-face education with online education has provided an opportunity to use modern information technology to access information and follow up students. That was useful for making the balance between work and education as well. Women were able to balance family duties with education and work. Last thing, here I have to thank the all organizations that financially support us, and they were mobilizing of financial resources to support these programs. A lot of thanks for all these financial organizations on the governmental and non-governmental level who supported these programs, of which some of them cannot continue with that support. Thank you for having the time to listen to this experience, and I really willing to hear from you also about your comments about it. Thank you.
Zahira, thank you. I don't know how you managed to cover so much, 9 points, each one so important in this short time, and having met many of the women in these different programs with you on my trips to Palestine, and knowing all that experience, the transformative trajectory, a bit like the women that Sujata works with. It's very inspiring indeed. So now we shift continents again. We move to Thais Corral in Brazil and address that big challenge of climate change and the environment. We go right over to you, Thais. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Rama, and it's a pleasure to be here with longtime friends. And as I was kind of preparing and trying to connect it to what would be like relevant to share in such a short space we have in this panel, one thing that came to me was that a month ago we celebrate the 100th anniversary of life of Paulo Freire, you know, this Brazilian educator that was very revolutionary for the idea of education in the world. And I always thought, you know, because I had many like feminists and women's organizations over the years that worked on education, and they always aligned very, very deeply with Paulo Freire, and it's interesting that I was reading, I mean, like his main ideas and concepts. There is such an alignment, and I would like to bring here just these 3 specific perspectives that underline all his work and the work that he spread throughout so many organizations throughout the world. And I think it so much has to do with the with what women has brought as the realm of education. No, first point, which I think it was the most revolutionary, no, is that every human being has a knowledge. No, I mean formal or informal, and this knowledge has to be honored as part of the education process. No, we remember that he did this literacy. I mean, the most revolutionary thing that Paulo Freire did was to bring literacy to the realm of the daily life of the people. So if you lived in the favela, you're going to learn to read or to, with the elements that were part of your culture, no? Because education is so much about references, no? So if you are taken out of the reference, seems that you don't know anything, you know, which I think it's so many times is what we were like induced to believe, no? The second thing is that education is not just intellectual. There is education is an integral part of our beings, you know, not only of the world but also our beings. So it's important to consider all levels of education, not just intellectual but also the emotional, the mental, the body, the health. All that we are is intelligence. And I think that as we create this connection between the inner and outer, that education is not just technical, but it's also, I mean, we have knowledge, we have knowing, we have intuition, all these things that are becoming more and more as you go into all these complexities are known, I think are taken into consideration. But I think women always had, because we live in this very, I would say, integrated world, we kind of know that, you know, and intuitively we know, but somehow some of our knowing was completely discarded. And I think that already Paulo Freire talked about that. No, and the third point that I think it's so important is the communal learning. No, that we only learn, everyone, nobody teaches. We are students and teachers all the time. No, like everybody learns with everybody. You know, so I think that more and more, this is how we all that we know, the modern technologies of learning and education, they all emphasize group learning and how like different abilities have to learn together. But this was already part of this platform, these three principles of and concepts of Paulo Freire. And also, because we have very little time, I would like to give you an example. No, like 10 years, 15 years ago, I came to a place because that was my point. How could we create a way of learning, of deeply learning with each other and honoring all kinds of knowledge, and how we could evolve together by creating change, you know, that transition also from ego-centered to eco-centered, and from really honoring what we all are converging for. And this place is a place near Rio that Rama and Zahira know about, which is called Sinal do Vale. So I thought I would share with you this 2-minute video that we could just have a sip of what it is, you know. I don't know if we can, I just thought it was a good idea, but I have to see if it's possible with the host to show the video. Is it?
It should be possible. The thing is, streaming videos tends to, lag, but if you would like to share your screen and play the video, we can try it now, Dr. Corbin.
Yeah, let's see if I can share my screen and then put the, okay?
Yeah.
Let's see, and I put here, let's see. Yeah, share screen and put the video, let's see. Does it work?
No, we don't see your screen yet.
I have it on my screen. Should I try and share from my screen if it's not working from Zahira's, from Thais's?
Yes, you can do
Is
that.
it working?
Please.
Okay, I'm just going to try and share screen on my side. And please tell me if that works. Where did I just have it? Here it is.
Eu sou Thaís Corral e há mais de uma década atrás cheguei neste vale. O que me encantou aqui, tenho certeza que vai encantar você também. Estamos pertinho de uma zona urbana cheia de casas, ruas, edifícios, cheia de cimento. Estamos perto da cidade do Rio de Janeiro, bem no fundo da Baía de Guanabara. E ainda assim, aqui entre montanhas, se esconde este vale, que é a casa, o habitat de muitas espécies de animais e de vegetação e de água. Eu comecei o Sinal do Vale porque eu queria ser a guardiã de um lugar que cuidasse dos animais, das árvores, das nascentes e das pessoas. Onde melhor fazer isso do que numa fazenda? E foi com esse chamado que aqui chegaram muitas pessoas e ajudaram a construir novos hábitos traduzidos em estações que vamos apresentar para você. Vamos apresentar a horta, os animais, a Mata Atlântica, a comida local, a nossa forma de consumir sem afetar a natureza e a comunidade que habita este lugar. Ah, e esquecendo de falar sobre o que significa Sinal do Vale, a sigla SINAL, sincronicidade, inovação e alegria. 3 valores que cultivamos aqui. A sincronicidade, que é a interdependência da vida. Abraçamos a inovação como forma de evoluir e celebramos a nossa convivência com as pessoas e a natureza com muita alegria. Agora é só conferir estação por estação e, no final, contar para a gente o que você achou. Okay, sorry, it was a bit confusing, but I think it was a way of also showing pictures, no, of these things we talked about. But the last thing I would like to say is that I think that the women's movement, no, over the years, the Women's Action Agenda 21 has been like an example of this kind of education that integrates these different aspects, no, the knowledge, the respect for everyone's knowledge, the integral education and the communal education. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Oops, Yes, I've unmuted. Thank you so much, Thais. It was very worth transporting us to the magic valley of Sinal and the exceptional work you're doing, and how you brought both young people, because your dream was, how can we create the leaders of tomorrow to be more sustainable than our generation has been if they don't live with nature? But at the same time, you've brought so many business leaders, Coca-Cola and I'm trying to remember what's that big company called, not Benz, the other one, BMW and so on, to actually live with nature and be transformed. What I'm really struck by is the incredible resonance and how each one of you has really built upon each other. I'm also terribly proud because in my own journey of going from more conventional approach to education and higher education, you have been such great teachers to me. I have learned so much from my experiences with you, Zahira, with the women of Palestine. I've learned so much from the core paradigm, Sujata, that you shared with us, and that the women I've worked with in your grassroots community, the favelas of India, when you find your power within and your power with each other, then you have the power to change anything in the world. And it's wonderful, Thais, you will find out that Sujata's entire PhD, which she co-wrote with the grassroots leaders, was based on Paulo Freire's work. And it would be great, Sujata, if you could put a couple of the links to your recent articles and interviews for us to share also with the conference organizers on this subject. So it's wonderful that you've been such inspirations. I've actually enacted your stories and stories of the women in your 3 communities around the world, whether I've been educating senior leaders in the UN or working with grassroots peace builders. And that's what is there. And actually Munira's story as well. Munira was a former student of mine in a course I taught for senior leaders of Afghanistan. And her story is also one I've enacted many times. And I'm also proud that the 3 of you are homes for humanity, meaning you've shown how every individual and every home can be the springboard for societal transformation, for ecological renewal. So with that, it's really, and this idea that if each one of us adopts these principles of recognizing the power within each person, and as you said, Sujata, igniting it, if each one of us is working in this collaborative, co-creative way, moving from ego to eco-centered, we really can be bringing about the change. I wonder if I could ask our hosts, we had wanted Pilar again to just say a few words of reflections on how these 3 experiences resonate with hers, but I know there's many sessions following this. Please let us know if we could take another few minutes to hear Pilar's kind of feedback, and if there is time for each of the speakers to reflect back on what they heard as resonant from the others. But if not, we will of course respect the timing and close right here with this extraordinary series of sharing. So just a tip from the host, please, on timing.
Maybe you could take 4 minutes, because in 5 minutes after that, the next session will begin. That's fine. Thank you.
So let's start with you, Pilar, and see whether we can hear one last word from the others before we close in the 4 minutes.
Yes. Just to thank Sujata, Zahira, and Thais for these wonderful opportunities to have an insight on what the work they have done, either like literacy, writing, or helping on women on confronting violence. And Thais, I love this, ecotistic instead of egotistic approaches to education, eco-education. So I think that I can't say more than, because it is very close and very short, and I do not want to take time. I just want to mention that one of the future approaches that exist is called SHE. It's an acronym, SHE, sane, humane, and ecological. Just look at what we saw are the 3 things. All the experiences that you have shared are exactly under this approach of studying scenarios. I am again honored to have been with you. This resonates, of course, very vastly with the specificities along the different continents, but the situation for women is still a challenge in many aspects, especially when you are looking at the most vulnerable women, and also women with disabilities, and now old women, and if they are in the adult years, and also with the disability, is even bigger, the challenge. So just to close, saying that it was really wonderful to listen to all of the 3 of you, and we all resonated with Paulo Freire. In fact, I was going to close with Paulo Freire as well, so it's very interesting. We did mention it. So I leave it here so it can go back to you.
Yeah, wonderful. Should we just hear one closing sentence of what is most resonant for each of you, Sujata, Zahira, and Thais, from what you heard and what you felt in this session? Sujata.
I think convergence was something that I was struck with in respect of different contexts. And as Pilar just said, I mean, how Paulo Freire has directly or indirectly influenced all of us.
Thank you. Zahira, a final thought, reflection, feedback from you?
Okay, I can say by listening to everybody, I can pick up something that perhaps Pilar and Thais had mentioned, and that led to an idea to me that should be discussed with women organizations, how we can be involved more in global issues related to climate changes and environment. And I think in Palestine, we are in need to discuss that because our region is very affected to that, yani, and that led to the really very warm weather that we have in our region. Little rains are coming in. I remember when I was young, it was like in September, we have a lot of rains and it continues till June. And now we are in December and still we didn't have rain at all. And that means that water, how we can think about future challenges related to water needs, hot or warm weathers, and these issue eradication of the earth and so on. So how these issues should be also discussed, and women organizations should be involved in, because some of the issues that we worked and they are successful as education and so on, make them learn more about these issues, and perhaps we can learn from other people's experiences how we can do that.
Thank you so much, Zahira. Thais, your last word.
Yes, what I wanted to say is what I felt as a thin line that permeates all the talks and the conversations, and I saw it throughout my almost 40 years of experience, 50 years of experience, 40, working with women is our drive, our passion for the empowerment of each other. And education is a source of empowerment, and validation, empowerment of what you know, what you already can learn, and how you can express that learning in the world. And I think that we all here have devoted our lives to that. So that's what I take from this panel.
What a powerful note to end with. This poem just jumped up to me as I was preparing this panel, and I'm going to share it as a closing note. Women, procreators of the possible. And I dedicate it to all of you. I also dedicate it to Munira, who had to flee from Afghanistan because her life was in danger, and now is, for the second time in her life, a refugee. And in addition to being a woman leader, is also a poet and an artist. So I'm dedicating this to all of the women like you who are pioneering change. Your eyes spy vistas of possibilities unfathomed. Your ears hear the chant of that which longs for change. Your nostrils smell opportunities, even in the midst of crisis. Your touch is the blessing that renews and regenerates. Your fingers spin designs of a future worth living. You are pioneers who awaken the human spirit. You are procreators of the world we've all long awaited. Thank you so much. Deep thanks to WAS, to the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the World University Consortium for organizing this conference. I also thank Chalpon, who has been a member of the humanity team and my former student, who has been supporting us in this session, and looking forward to continuing our co-creation of transformative education from the inside for the outside of the future of our Earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Hello to everybody. Hope you can hear me.
Hello, Ellie. Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you yet. We have Thomas Reuter here with us. We're still waiting for the other presenters.
Okay. But I couldn't see myself, although my camera is open. I don't know why. No problem.
Hello, Elif. It's Thomas here. How are you?
Hi, Thomas. I think this is your voice. Happy to hear you.
Yes, my video doesn't show yet either.
No,
So-
I can see you, but I don't know why you couldn't see me. No problem. The most important thing, we can hear each other. So this is the most important thing. And it's good to see you.
Likewise.
So I think we have 13 participants, and because of the shortage of time, perhaps it is better to start as quickly as possible. Let me be sure other participants, especially who will make presentations, are with us. Dear Thomas is with us. Dear Mariana, are you with us?
Well, we're still waiting for Mariana Bozesan,
Okay.
Velamur, and Zbigniew Boknias.
And what about Shesh Velamur?
He is not here either. Oh, yes, he's just joined, and I'll make him panelist.
Good.
So
good.
now we're waiting for Mariana Bozesan and Zbigniew Boknias.
Okay. And Zbigniew, we are waiting. Mariana couldn't be able to join us. She sent a message because she is rewarded. We are proud of her national academic reward of her country. So unfortunately, I think she was informed at the last minute. That's why she wouldn't be able to join us.
You mean Mariana Todorova, yeah?
Yes, Mariana Todorova, unfortunately, will not be with us within this session.
Mm-hmm. Because we have two Marianas.
No, Mariana Bozesan will be with us, but
Yes.
Mariana Todorova, unfortunately, wouldn't be here.
Okay, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Just want to check to see if I'm signed in.
Hi,
Hi, this is Sash.
Sash, it's
Sash.
good to see you. Good to see you.
I'm not able to see anybody.
I couldn't see myself as well. Just I see you and Thomas, but
There. Okay.
yeah, but why I'm not here, I don't know. But at least you hear me. This is more important than my view. Oh, you can see me now.
Now we can, yes. That's much better.
Okay, so Sesh is with us. We are waiting for, I think, Zbigniew and Mariana.
Mm-hmm. Elif, perhaps we should start, and
Yeah,
I'm happy to swap.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. So and I think there are 14 participants. So I think we can start because if Mariana Bozesan is not with us now, she may understand us. So because in the conference paper, we expect her to present first, but if you don't mind, I will go with Thomas. Thomas, perhaps shortly you will introduce yourself, and your title is The Prison of Rationality and How to Liberate Ourselves from It, right?
That's right. Thank you, Elif. Well, my name is Thomas Reuter, and I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Melbourne. I'm also a trustee of VARS, and I have a number of other hats, but I won't bore you with that. Instead, I'll talk about something much more interesting, and that is the human imagination, which I see as a mental faculty equal to reason, but different and complementary. And this is not just an opinion, but it's something I'm going to try and show how exactly that works, where the imagination actually arises. Now, there's few scholars in the Western tradition who've actually paid attention to the imagination. I've written a little bit about it in the past, and I've been inspired by my work in Indonesia. Another one is, though, Henry Corbin, who's quite well known, and he has always reminded us of a self-imposed poverty in our present civilization. And I quote him: "Western philosophy, drawn along in the wake of the positive sciences, has long admitted only two sources of knowledge. There's sense perception, which gives us the data we call empirical, and they are the concepts of understanding the world of the rational laws governing those empirical data. But as Corbin further notes, there is also active imagination," and I quote, "which has its own noetic and cognitive function, which gives us access to a region and a reality of being, which without that function remains closed and forbidden to us, and whose disappearance brings on a catastrophe of the spirit." Corbin's active imagination is reminiscent somewhat of the imaginatio vera, or true imagination, in the work of Paracelsus, and also to the Vedanta notion of kalpana, or creative imagination, which is seen as the world-creating faculty of the mind, or mana kalpita jagat. In this paper, I ask, how are we to understand this second mental function in scientific terms? How does imagination arise, and how does it relate to the current late modernist malaise in science and education? Now, I regard image formation, or the forming of images, mental images, as the foundation of all subjective experience and consciousness in animals, and of course, most of all in humans. And I would like to argue that there are three kinds of images: those of the past, those of the seeming present, which is really the very recent past, because there's a delay between perception and image formation, and finally, those not of but for the future. In other words, I see normal consciousness ultimately as a bidirectional engagement with time. This is a rather strange assertion, I must admit, but let me explain why image formation is vital for the everyday subjective experience of change. Now, Corbin's inspiration was Persian philosophy, and he saw active imagination as a mediator between reason and the senses. I see it somewhat differently. I see the connection with reason, but I don't think the idea of a mediating function really captures what imagination does. And to clarify the role of imagination, I'd like to draw your attention to some very basic mechanisms of consciousness, which emerged rather early, many hundreds of millions of years ago in the evolution of life. Now, the three classes of images I mentioned, past, present, and future, correspond to memory-based reason, sensation, and imagination. And all three are vital cognitive functions. There were some behavioral researchers, Alan Baddeley and Graham Hitch, who were the first to propose that consciousness is based on working memory. That was in the 70s, and they were inspired by Vygotsky's idea of internalized speech. They were hoping to understand what we actually do with memory in the now and how that relates to consciousness. And they built on earlier work by two physiologists, Holst and Mittelstadt, who had the vital research findings to explain this. The latter had made an important discovery about how animals perceive change or motion in the environment, which is something that animals must do to stay alive, irrespective of whether they're hunters or hunted. They found that animals continue continuously create a multi-sensory mental image of what is happening now. They store that image in working memory briefly and then compare it with the next image created from what is perceived in the next now. Animals thus create an internal loop through the past with the help of a continuous imaging function designed to detect change over time, by comparing those images. And change means it could be a predator coming, it could be some prey that might be of interest, and so on. And by extension, certainly in humans, this imaging process also allows for the rational post hoc analysis of causal relationships between events. The word image is somewhat biased, I should mention, because there are, of course, also auditory and olfactory elements that flow into this imaging process. Now, together, the imaging techniques of conscious beings are called afference copy mechanisms. And the mechanisms concerned with storing observations of the outside world and thus creating a loop through the past is called ex-afferescence. You could say that ex-afferescence is what gives us the impression of a passage of time and also something to operate our reason upon. Now, that's all very nice, but not so surprising. Our memory of the past, of course, helps us notice when something new appears, a new sight, sound, or smell. This is a process that resonates strongly with the basic operations of science. New empirical observations are evaluated against an earlier model of reality, and the model is adjusted or updated. This is basically the way we teach the scientific method. The much overlooked and intriguing matter, however, is that the two physiologists found a second looping process, which they call pre-efferescence. In perception, a second problem arises. While what an animal does may depend on what it sees, the image an animal sees in turn depends on what the animal does. For example, if it moves its head, the image of the world will change, even though nothing has moved in the environment. Therefore, even simple animals evolved so-called reafference mechanisms to predict what image they should perceive in future as a result of their own action, so that this imagined image can be compared with what is actually observed by the senses. Action would be utterly impossible to monitor and control without this second loop. Think of hand-eye coordination in catching a ball, for example. If there is a motion in the environment, it can thus be detected reliably, even though the animal is in motion itself, because the potentially confounding effect of the subject's own action have been compensated for by creating this loop through the future. Now, as far as I can tell, the significance of this mechanism has been left somewhat unexplored. Just as ex-afference evolved into higher memory-based rational function for the post-hoc analysis or observations, re-efference evolved into a higher imaginal function, allowing animals not just to monitor action from moment to moment, but also to plan by contemplating the various futures their different action sequences could create. All the more curious then is that contemporary humanities should be so unable to imagine a positive, desirable future and to act accordingly in the present. If the actions we're actually taking lead to suicidal and equicidal outcomes, why do we persist? Why are we so powerless to change? And I argue it is because we have failed to do justice to this second and complementary imaginal subjectivist function of the mind, which has a crippling effect. And this is repeated in each generation as children are taught in a modernist system of education that has this rationalist, objectivist bias and cannot see the importance of imagination. So for the sake of simplicity, we can think of those two afference operations at the physiological level as, in terms of sensory mental experience, as imaging and imagining. Imaging is about the past and imagining about the future. And these cognitive functions are rational and imaginal. All experience that we image and store of the objective past, whereas imagining is about creating virtual images that are not observations, but a continuous inner broadcast of projected future states reflecting the expected impact of the subject's own action. Modernist rational science has serious trouble accommodating the imaginal function within its objectivist worldview. The consequences are devastating, and unfortunately, the causes are also deeply entrenched, not least within a flawed modernist system of education. That must change. It shouldn't be that the most creative people we have, people like Einstein, like Tesla, were often eccentric, dreamers, misfits, people full of imaginations. They didn't get where they got by education, but they are survivors of education. It shouldn't have to be like that. To conclude, our senses may be great at telling us what is out there and equally within our body. Reason is great at analyzing post hoc how elements of the world relate, the order of things, reality as it is, but it is imagination that helps us picture and choose between different futures. Reason remains tied to what is, the truth, perhaps, which lies in the past by the time we grasp it. But the exclusive worship of reason has led us into an entrapment within a kind of hyper-realism. Hyper in the sense that this world of images we inhabit is also a world, is really just a world that is created, or in the words of the Tabula Smaragdinas, sicut mundus creatus est. That's something we should remember, that the worlds, that even the worlds of the past are worlds that have been created. Imagination needs to be reinstated and properly understood as the faculty of higher order thinking par excellence. There are some truths perhaps in the biblical claim that we humans were created in the image, so to speak. For indeed, it is the nature of the human mind to be in a world of images. But we are not just knowers of images, we are also image creators. Imagination enables us to recognize ourselves as moral subjects, as creators, as makers of images and of new worlds. Imagination is indeed the vital force that makes conscious action and moral action possible. It is so fundamental that it defines us, and in its simplest forms is present in all sentient life. We do not need to learn to imagine. What learners need is opportunity to develop their imagination, to share it with others, and to imagine shared futures together within conscious communities of moral actors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Thomas. Very intellectual, so well-designed, philosophical presentation. So, as Einstein said, logic may take us from point A to B, but imaginations can take us wherever we want. So thank you so much for your presentation. I would like to pass quickly to the second presenter. I would like to ask again, dear Mariana, are you with us? Mariana Bozesa?
No, she's not yet joined.
Not yet. Okay, then I will go with dear Shesh. Could you please give your presentation, share your presentation with us?
Thank you. It's early in the morning here on the west coast of the US. I just woke.
Dear Sesh, I would like to remind everyone, let's keep our microphones turned off because there is some echo.
Okay.
Sesh, I think you're connected from two devices in the same room, so there is a feedback.
Is it better now? Oh, hang on.
Still we have this echo.
Yeah, I will shut this down. 1 second. That's okay. Is this better?
Much better.
Oh.
Still,
no, I
there,
still have.
compared to previous one, it is perhaps.
Yeah, let me put this one away a little bit farther. And hang on, I'm sorry.
Do you mind, Sesh, if I keep going with Sydney? Dear Sesh?
Yeah, 1 second.
Dear Zidnik, your microphone is turned off. We couldn't hear you, but
We
you
will
said
survive. Yeah, I mean, there are always.
Oh boy.
Good to see. Yes.
I'm trying to, yeah. Is this better?
Now it's okay.
Or better.
Now, yes, we solved the problem. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I am going to be trying to do is to present a set of ideas that I believe have to become the basis for education, not only of formal institutions, academic and otherwise, but informal, public, and academia. So let me begin. Okay. There is general agreement among scholars that humans are now in what is defined as the Anthropocene, best described in the Encyclopedia of Earth as follows. The Anthropocene defines Earth's most recent geological time period as being human-influenced or anthropogenic based on overwhelming global evidence that atmospheric, geologic, hydrologic, and other Earth system processes are now altered by humans. The word combines the root anthropo, meaning human, with the root scene, the standard suffix for epoch in geologic time. The Anthropocene is distinguished as a new period, either after or within the Holocene, the current epoch, which began approximately 10,000 years ago with the end of the last glacial period. The Anthropocene is a starting point in terms of major revolution, in terms of humans moving away from being hunter-gatherers to farming and agriculture, and for all intents and purposes, the onset of evolution of what can be described as civilization and societies, inclusive of varieties of politics, economics, religion, and culture, based on philosophies, concepts, and ideas, or what might be best described as operant paradigms. These operant paradigms can be traced to human attempts to understand, define, and act on three major relationships, namely humans and divinity, humans and nature, and humans vis-a-vis humans. Civilizations, Eastern and Western, have in a broad sense operated on two such paradigms or philosophies, describing the nature of the three relationships named above. The first one, namely the polytheistic Eastern, which predates the monotheistic Western by millennia, is based on the idea that humans and the divine are inseparable. Humans are part and parcel of nature, inextricably connected and interdependent, and all life, including human life, is one and the same, as opposed to the ideas of Western civilization that postulates that humans and the divine are wholly separate. God has given humans dominion over nature to understand and use for human progress, and human life is sanctity personified over and above all other life. Both of these paradigms are operating to this day, even though the Eastern paradigm is steadily receding into the background, even as recent realizations seem to be forcing humans to reconsider returning to it, notwithstanding the fact that the Western paradigm has now emerged as the dominant one over the last 2 millennia. A major difference in these two paradigms is that the Eastern paradigm pursued knowledge for knowledge's sake, and in the process obtained profound understandings of the external world, but was primarily preoccupied with knowing the inner human self based on inner directed explorations to obtain release from the human condition, as in moksha or nirvana. The Western paradigm moved forward within the framework of what is best described as the Baconian method, directed at the external world, thus obtaining discoveries and inventions to apply and use for human progress, progress deemed to be limitless, based on understanding and exploiting nature for meeting human material needs. An important distinction needs to be made with respect to the inherent nature of the two paradigms. The distinction is with respect to the scope and extent of human agency. I'd like us to keep in mind this word, human agency, in obtaining desired outcomes and futures. Implied in the Western paradigm is the assumption that human agency, as ordained by the divine, is the sole determinant of desired outcomes and futures. The Eastern paradigm, on the other hand, while not eliminating human agency, is much more fatalistic and demands human agency be used within the framework of broader ideas and values described above. Given this background, it will now be appropriate to assess the state of the planet and the general condition of humans on it, and more important, to examine whether the idea of human agency as the sole determinant of desired outcomes and futures is valid and sustainable. The dominant paradigm operating for the last 2 millennia, based on human agency as the sole determinant of desired outcomes, has developed and implemented a plethora of ideas to create utopia. While it is important to acknowledge that the accomplishments are fantastic by way of improving the material condition of humans, uneven as it is, it would be fair to expect that utopia would have manifested long ago. Needless to say, however, anyone looking dispassionately at the human condition and the state of the planet today, one would have to conclude that utopia is nowhere near to being achieved, and actually, in many respects, we are confronted with the stark reality of dystopia and unintended consequences. Human populations have burgeoned from hundreds of millions to billions. Poverty, disease, pandemics, war, destruction of the natural world, extinction of species, climate change, impending exhaustion of natural resources, etc., is there for all to see. It is at this critical juncture, it is imperative, therefore, that we take a second look at how the future comes about. In order to get such an understanding, it is necessary to first attempt to describe a model that will best illustrate the process in action that causes the future to come about. The following is an attempt to outline the framework of a model that more closely approximates the logical structure of the real world. The model can be described as follows. It is a three-dimensional matrix. The first axis is humans as participants, individually and collectively, concurrently functioning as agents at 8 different levels of identity, continuously attempting to optimize their multiple interests, namely individual, family, neighborhood, city, state, region, nation, the planet. The second axis is the world around them in the natural realm, the hydrosphere, the biosphere, the zoosphere, the atmosphere, space, and beyond, all in a constant state of flux, naturally and otherwise. The third axis is the varieties of systems that humans have initiated and have then evolved into the current forms, social, economic, political, religious, cultural, et al. Similarly, in a state of constant flux. This complex three-dimensional matrix, mathematically speaking, equates to a mind-bogglingly huge number of dynamic interactions taking place sequentially and simultaneously every second, every minute, every hour, every day, and so on. Humans as agents between themselves, interacting with elements of the second and third dimensions, similarly interactions within and between the elements of the second and third dimensions, all resulting in outcomes and consequences that one can reasonably argue would be beyond any currently known means of managing towards a desired outcome, and destroys the smug and misplaced notion of humans managing and obtaining desired outcomes and futures. The evidence to support this conclusion abounds all around us. Scholars around the world are suggesting that humans are at a critical juncture as to their future, and that survival of the species is at risk if course corrections are not taken. As it relates to course corrections, recent scholarship has given rise to ideas and concepts that enable a better understanding of how the future comes about, human agency notwithstanding. A complete and comprehensive presentation is beyond the scope of this paper, but a list of them with brief definitions is valid and required. First, the idea that the Earth is being, or Gaia. The Gaia hypothesis, also known as the Gaia Theory, Gaia paradigm, or the Gaia principle, proposes that living organisms interact with their inorganic surroundings on Earth to form a synergistic and self-regulating complex system that helps to maintain and perpetuate the conditions for life on the planet. I would refer to the work of Dr. James Lovelock, who introduced the notion of Gaia. There are 7 principles underlying all life. 1, the principle of abstraction. There is something intangible behind the life in physical bodies, indeed behind all matter, and that the immateriality is revealed by the flow of time, which literally makes things into events. All forms of this mysterious noumenon is abstraction. The principle of interrelatedness, which geneticists tells us is a measurable fact among all members of a species, including humanity in all its races, and on deeper investigation, turns out to apply as well to whole kingdoms of creatures, not to mention interrelations between kingdom and kingdom, or between world and world without end. The principle of omniscience of life, which denies that an impervious boundary has ever been found between any of the kingdoms, or for that matter, between life and non-life, which leads to the inescapable conclusion that all rocks and seas and worlds, and consequently the entire universe, must in sense be alive. The polarity principle, which recognizes the balance and mutuality of the opposites that we see everywhere, things like light and darkness, good and evil, male and female, predator and prey, matter and energy, all of which by their contrast give definition to life and make it work. The principle of transcendence, which refers to the development of our perspectives on time and space as we grow older, as well as the progressive absorption of all self into a wider awareness as one matures spiritually. The germination of worlds, a critical event that seems to happen once to every celestial organism and after billions of years of slow evolution. The greatest mystery of all, the ultimate mystery of divinity, or whatever you choose to call the unknowable essence that leading thinkers have long believed somehow exists beyond creation and maintenance of all body, mind, and spirit, not to mention behind every other known or unknown wonder of the universe. The future, therefore, as I would put it, is an emergence. Based on the description of the complex model given above, it would be easy to see that the future emerges out of the interactions with human inputs as active walkers. Some processes that are inherent in the emergence are the elements of complexity, the tipping points, catastrophes, self-organization, and so on. Let me quickly, briefly describe each of these, and then I will conclude. Complexity, simply defined as the study of the phenomena which emerge from a collection of interacting objects. Complexity characterizes the behavior of a system or model whose components interact in multiple ways and follow local rules, meaning there is no reasonable higher instruction to define the various possible interactions. The term is generally used to characterize something with many parts, where those parts interact with each other in multiple ways, culminating in a higher order of emergence greater than the sum of its parts. Catastrophes. The catastrophes occur when, as we move in a continuous way through the family of parameters, usually by smoothly changing a stable fixed point of the family, loses its stability. This change of stability forces the system to move abruptly to the region of a new stable fixed point. The butterfly effect, which we all already know about. The butterfly effect is the sensitive dependence on initial conditions in which a small change in one state of a deterministic nonlinear system can result in large differences in a later state. Tipping points, the critical point in a situation, process, or system beyond which a significant and often unstoppable effect or change takes place. And probably the most important, self-organizing systems. Self-organization, also called spontaneous order, is a process where some form of overall order from local interaction between parts of an initially disordered system. The process can be spontaneous when sufficient energy is available, not needing control by an external agent. All this that I have presented basically is to point out that we overstate the idea of human agency as the sole determinant of outcomes. Students, academic and otherwise, must and be made aware of the fact that the future, at least as far as I think about it, is an emergence out of a complex interplay of multiple factors that I have just described. So what it means basically is an human agency must play the role of enlightened self-interest as a component, as an input to the system, which can then create an outcome that we would have desired. The idea that you can create futures in a top-down fashion in a short-term 4-year, 5-year, 10-year basis is a fool's errand. Thank you.
Okay, dear Serge, thank you so much. Yes, we are surrounded with complex systems and interdependencies, interconnectedness, and etc. And as you said, enlightening experience is of vital for our higher education. So thank you so much for your presentation. And unfortunately, I heard that the other Mariana Bozesan, wouldn't be able to join us. This means that I tried to give 15 minutes to each panelist, but presenter. Zibnik will have 15 minutes as well. Then it seems we will have 10 extra minutes. So you can share your feedbacks or other ideas with us. The floor is yours, dear Zibnik. Could you please turn on your microphone?
Thank you very much, Elif. I'm happy to see you, everybody, and I would prefer we are sitting in the same room. My presentation is about question, which I knew the answer for years, for sure, that higher education is an important contribution. But last years, and particularly during this crisis, I started doubting about that, about all education, whether the current education is good enough to meet the current challenges. Let me move to the agenda. Next, please. Okay. So, there are high expectations of this conference. I guess we are moving toward the end, and then I would like to talk briefly and then mention some of the challenges. And then as a response, I would like to propose a type of educational kit, a type of system to educate new generation to survive in with all these challenges, and then I will have some conclusions. Okay, I have more slides than I need, but in general I'll be zipping quite fast. But please let me know 3 minutes before the end of my time. Okay?
Yeah, for sure. With great pleasure.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm happy that we have that type of dialogue, and that I hope we'll save enough time to share. I'm was so pleased with Thomas' presentation, emphasizing the imagination, how important is imagination to resolve current problem and build sustainable future. I'm also pleased with Shesh system approach. In fact, this is what he suggested. I just finished the panel discussion on the previous session, and we agreed that we need to have a system approach. And I suggested also to use system analysis as a meta language, for different disciplines, because we need to find the common language, to build bridges between different disciplines in academia if you want to move to social transformation into sustainability, and to share knowledge and experiences. Next, please. Then the issue is, we emphasize in the previous session, and at the same time I see here, we need to have a common ground, a value set we agreed upon, and then to add that to any quantitative or qualitative sustainability criteria. And then we as educators, we need to apply results of our dialogue, what will come out from this conference, to learning process we are conducting, to prepare next generation to emerging challenges. I have mentioned, next please, yes. Challenges, yes, next slide, yes. Well, there are many challenges. I just mentioned some of you, climate change, biodiversity decline, and then through information overload with fake news. We are still fighting, and I don't see the end of COVID pandemic. I barely survived this year, by the way, so I am happy to be with you, invigorated, but still long way to fully recover. And then we have very dangerous processes with growing populism, nationalism, xenophobia, leading to conflict and wars. Talking about images, I am waking up during the night. I see the children and families push up through the border between Belarus and Poland, by inhuman administrators, inhuman government on both sides. I'm talking about not only about Belarus, but also on the Polish government. They push back without any human concern, and then cut off of media to avoid imaging, to build our imagination, to understand what's going on. So political systems are very important, and then our education might be not succeeded if we will leave this issue aside. So we have huge gaps between rich and poor, and also we have many new technologies, and some of them are helpful, but sometimes we are losing control. What our colleagues in academia are telling us, the 21st century is the continuing and rapid changes, but where change is the constant feature of our reality, So somehow we need to be aware, and then we need to prepare. This is a big responsibility for us. But also, both COVID pandemic and climate crisis call us to act fast and to design effective actions to save global community. Are we prepared for this? Next, please. I suggested, that based on the sources I studied in my 53 years in academia, to develop a type of toolkit for students to survive and prosper. And first, starting with the designing learning process as discovery of new knowledge and looking for innovative solution to emerging problems. The next element is to teach and practice critical and system thinking through practical case solving, practicing peer-to-peer training, and then using endogenous knowledge, and asking challenging questions to learn about discern illegitimate information, or to learn how to avoid and discard fake news or manipulated news. The critical and another element is building social competencies from community, from communication skills to working in transdisciplinary teams in resolving practical problems. The other issue is to need to prepare our students to work with stakeholders, to be open for stakeholders to understand their needs and to respond to them with new skills and knowledge. And then if we build already human capital and social capital, I understand as economists, I'm very sorry if you are disturbed by my economic language, but I am economist. But social capital, I mean relation capital, all these interdependence, the relations with other human being is the social capital. And we need to create that type of capital, which is celebrating a successful solution for community problems. Next, please. So I heavily utilize the partnership for 21st century, combining with my experience. And what is important and particularly missing very often in the current activities is the evidence-based education of policy and practice. And this is something what they promote, and innovative teaching and learning for all. When I see the practice of Polish government dealing with the COVID-19, it's a politically goals approach, not evidence-based. They ignored evidence-based data provided by experts. So how we can survive in such a system? Next, please. And what is important if we are teaching?
Dear Zivnik, you have 3 more minutes.
Okay, good. So we need to focus not only on science, but to make global awareness and teach them civic literacy and also health literacy and environmental to survive. And then let's move to conclusions. The last 2 slides, please. So in general, I see that the knowledge, the education could be a great contribution. Janine, the last 2 slides, please. Okay, the next one. So anyway, the next one. Yeah, okay, what is important to give them skills of good communication, because the even best knowledge will not be practical if we don't know how to use it, and then apply it in real life problems. And then this way we should shape student sensitivity, passion, and empathy. What I am observing now. This is something, and this is what gives us the working with community stakeholders, because we understand the problem. We try to support them and developing passion and empathy. This is something what we are missing, the emotional elements in our education. So anyway, so education, next please. And then education is a critical foundation for social transformation. But if we do not combine it with stakeholders, particularly if we do not have influence on the government, if we do not have democratic system, if we have centralized system, well, we might have well-designed education process, but we will lose the opportunity to contribute to social transformation, to desired social transformation for sustainability. So anyway, this is something what we need to keep in mind, that besides academia, besides education world, there are other stakeholders who not necessarily are focusing on sustainability or human well-being. They want to extend or sustain their rulings, and they do not support that type of education we were talking today in our presentation. So anyway, this is something what we need to work together on common language. We need to together with different disciplines to find the common language and develop the solution to avoid deterioration of basic human rights, values, natural resources, and degradation and wars. This is something what is the current world with all these demands and challenging around. And so we need to learn how to work together and take advantage of emerging technologies, which sometimes could be very useful, but sometimes could be dangerous and making us more dependent and even enslaved. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be delighted to respond to questions.
Thank you so much, Zibnik. We enjoyed this presentation a lot. You underlined the importance of 21st century skills like global awareness, critical thinking, health literacy, different literacies, and inclusion of stakeholders, and learning how we can equip students with resilience, and we need to add long-term vision, so learning conflict management skills and etc. So you underlined very important things. Thank you so much. Now I would like to ask all of the presenters, do you want to add extra things or give some feedback? So I can start with Thomas, then can go with Serge, and then with Zibnik. So please, Thomas.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to know that I think there's quite a bit of overlap between my paper and Serge's paper. That's very interesting. I think your concept of these three domains, I think it's very vital. And in anthropology, we speak of human ecology. So that's the way a society as a whole, on the basis of its culture, its history, its politics and everything, interacts with the environment. It's our way with the environment, and
yes,
human ecologies differ. And it's interesting how long human beings have lived quite harmoniously with their ecosystems, maybe causing some damage. All species do cause some impact, but within, reasonable limits. And it's really only the last 200 years that things have gone off that path, that long established path.
It's the onset of the Baconian paradigm that has changed everything.
That's right, and it's modernism, and it's that same that's why I'm critiquing modernism. It's left the imagination out, and it's all about facts. You know, science is all about facts, and it doesn't guide us about the future we want to create. It tells us what is, but not what could be.
Yes.
And that's because the imagination has been written off as fantasy. I just wanted to say that I remember very distinctly when I was 4 years old, and I was living in a city, mixed groups of children ages playing together, and I realized with shock, you know, the impact that school had on my playmates. They could no longer play. I thought that school was this terrible place where horrible things were done to children. And when I went to school, I went there like one goes to a war zone, because I felt that whatever this place was, it had a terrible impact on people's imagination, you know, and I think my fears were justified. And I kind of lived through education like a lot of people who, you know, who have a strong imagination. Creative people struggle with that system. I see a lot of boys I see also struggling with it, the disciplinary, oppressive side of it. And it's really PhD students at that final level, suddenly it turns around. Then, you know, you're supposed to be creative, break new ground, do something completely unexpected and wonderful. And how they're supposed to do it. I've had so many conversations with my PhD students. I had to give them kind of a therapy to encourage them, to find, you know, to let them find the courage again to use their imagination. I think that's terrible, and something has to happen there.
Well,
and it's that bloody mindedness of modernity that does it, you know. Anyway.
Yeah. So based on what Thomas just said, I have a couple of comments and then maybe add to something that Zbigniew pointed out. One is, he was talking about critical thinking. I think there are, as I understand it, there are 4 basic errors that happen in how we think or based on information. One is insufficient information. 2 is incorrect information. And 3 is bias. And 4 is prejudice. Bias and prejudice are kind of interconnected. But to give you an example of insufficient information, average is used as a number all over the place. But if you do not know the deviation around the average, you will not understand what's going on. The height of people on the planet can be stated to be an average of 5'4". It is totally useless information unless you know what is the variation around that average, just to give you an example. But on the other, now, as to populism, nationalism, fundamentalism, and so on, I have kind of fashioned a notion that we are undergoing 3 or 4 major transformations globally, which cannot be understood in decadal or even generational timeframes. The first transition, as I describe it, is between knowledge and scientific systems vis-a-vis faith and belief. Basically, what I'm pointing out is that over millennia, knowledge and acquisition of information about the world around us intersects what we have been told is being truth from the very beginning. And that intersection has created the tension between the increasing return to fundamentalism, because vested interests do not want to give up their power, influence, and control. But I have a feeling, though, that knowledge about us, around us, and about ourselves will eventually overcome the whole idea of truth being a given from the very beginning. The second transition is what I would describe as the revolution that took place in 1954 with the discovery of the DNA molecule. Basically, till even now, it is continuing, which is the knowledge acquired about the external world. But in 1954, the discovery of the DNA molecule pointed us towards understanding who we are and knowing that we are not very far away from chimpanzees, or for that matter, that we are vital dust from the stars, according to a Nobel laureate, Christian Deduve. That is a transition that is revolutionary in terms of understanding who we are. It shatters the notion of self and humans as being the most important. The third one, transition-wise, as I see it in a global millennial sense, is the idea of the nation state being overcome by the notion of globalization.
Yeah.
So in terms of nationalism, in terms of populism, in terms of the return to the identities of the nation state and other ideas, is because it's a reaction to being powerless to cope with the idea of globalization. And the fourth, let me quickly, and the fourth transition has to do in a very general sense about human societies intersecting as it relates to collectivism versus individualism. Yeah. Basically, the notion that individualism is supreme importance, where only rights are emphasized and no obligations, is the devastation that we are seeing around us.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to, I think, finish at 4:50. So, dear Zipnik, you have time because we can use 3 more minutes, but the next session will start at 6:50. Sorry, 4:50. So, Zipnik, please share your feedbacks or ideas, extra additions with us.
Thank you, for your comments. I agree. I agree with you. Yeah, that this is the problems we have with this nationalistic tribe approach, coming from fear of globalization, of fast technological changes, and all these conspiracy theories, and that's simplest way of explaining the complexity. So the complexity is hard to bear for even educated people, like
it is.
We are in academia. This is really tough. What about the simple people? So this is something what is important for us. But I still hope that we will overcome that type of difficulties by reforming education, by open them that we are part of a global community. We need to start thinking, freedom is great, but the same liberty I have equals my responsibility. So there is no freedom without responsibility, period. This is how we should teach. And this is somehow, when we are talking about education, we should keep, not in mind, not only knowledge and skills, but also shaping attitudes, shaping citizenship. And we should move citizenship, to the global citizenship. So we are working locally, resolving local problems, but we should keep this in the global context, how they support. This is why I was thinking about put some things in a type of toolkit, and working on the recovery after COVID. I was thinking, okay, if I will survive, what I should do, I mean, first of all, be useful. And this is something what I learned from my grandfather, who was substitute to my father, who I lost as a little child. He was always telling, we should be useful. for our family, for our community. Don't think just about yourself, but about your useness, your contribution to the community. So anyway, this is something what we need to teach open mind, new generation, and in general, what I would like to share with you also, it was conclusion from the other session, but also I observed, working with young people at the university. Young generation is ahead of us in terms of thinking, globally, and much more sensitive to those issues we used to live for years and did not discover. So anyway, get involved, all stakeholders, young and old, and then work for our common future. Thank you.
I would like to thank all of you. I benefited a lot. I'm sure all attendees enjoyed this session. But I would like to, dear Thomas offered a very nice thing, and he said, could it be possible to get some questions? But unfortunately, we don't have time for this. It is risky. The next session will start very soon, but we can do it like this. Next session is a panel. So we can carry some of these issues to some other meetings, because there are no presentations as we had in this session. So perhaps we can do it in this way, dear Thomas.
Okay, that's good. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you're
So,
right. We've only have 4 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, so because people may need a break, so hope to see you in the next session. Thank you so much to all of you. And I can see that there are some very good friends among attendees. I'm happy to see all of you, and thank you so much. And also I would like to thank to the organizers of this conference. Of course, it's a great pleasure for us to be the part of this. So thank you again. And take care, stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Elif.
Good afternoon, Paula. Good afternoon, Rodolfo. Can you hear me? Should we use the 2 minutes or 3 minutes for testing?
Sure, sounds great. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. You can probably see my picture, but now I should be on.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Hello, Paula.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent.
Can you all hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So, Paula, I will have a few slides in my presentation that will be much more compact, much more efficient. And I'll be moving through them very quickly, but since there will be a recording, I think that should be okay too. If it is okay with you and Rodolfo.
Paula,
So
you are in charge.
So if you have slides, then I suggest that he probably goes first, and then we can dive into our discussions.
It's okay. So we could really go as you were planning, and I can leave it any pattern you wish. So in addition to my talking, I will have some slides, and the transition will be a few seconds, so it won't take time.
Okay, perfect. So do you wish to use your slides when answering some of the questions that we have for the panel?
Yes.
Does that work for you? Okay, perfect. We can do that.
So Paula, what was your feeling from our last session? I mean, the meeting, the work group meeting.
Oh, the meeting we had last week?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yeah, no, that was a good meeting. I think we covered a lot of good information there.
Was that useful for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was useful in setting this up to ensure that we weren't overlapping, right? So I appreciate that you took the time to set that up. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Women, I thought you would have had your statues behind you.
Mine is just around the corner. Unfortunately, I don't have a shelf for it to be displayed. I should work on that in my setup, though.
I'm in the same boat. Mine is like in front of me. I should put it behind me.
I think we can begin this panel now.
All right, Rodolfo, would you like to get us started? Would you like to introduce us?
The way you prefer. I mean, I think that you are in charge, but I like to just to have a few consideration on the title of this session, that is STEAM leadership, integrating values, innovation, creativity, and social impact for science and technology education. It's a long title because there are many points to touch, and I'm pretty sure that we'll be unable to touch all of them in this session because 1 hour passed so fast. But I think that we are in good company because panelists are so clever to synthesize a lot of topics just in few phrases, and so I think that we will take advantage of them in that way to have a clear situation. And so the topic is so important. Just thinking about STEAM and the transition that now university are thinking from STEM to STEAM is all around, and we see different flavors and fragrances to this shift all over the world. But I think that we have to be really careful because I don't think that that kind of shift will stop there. Is just an opportunity to rethink all the way we approach, the just capturing knowledge from experience, from infancy to lifelong learning. And just STEM was the past. STEAM will be the future for university, but then we have to prepare young students to to face this reality. And so early and from infancy, we have to start from infancy, just to be sure that they are able to build the right connections, because just to deal with complexity in the right way. And there are many issues to discuss, and that's the reason why the World Academy created a working group that is the STEAM working group that now analyzed all the most adopted pedagogies all over the world, and try to develop new ones and try to make connection, from infancy to university to offline learning. It's an enormous task, but I think that anybody who would like to join our working group is very welcome, because there is, thinking for everybody there. And so I think that here we can discuss just a few perspectives of that point of STEAM, and then they will be useful just as a background for more thinking, because that's the usual way that we approach complexity. That we need approximation by approximation by approximation, conference by conference by conference, panels by panels by panels, going deeper and deeper anytime. And so with this kind of consideration, I pass you the floor.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you again for inviting me to join and inviting our panelists today. I'll tell you, I tend to get invited to a lot of things where we talk about very specific things in engineering or science, and we tend to pull things apart. And this is one of the first settings where I've seen us really focus on the integration of what STEAM really means. And then that application. And what I really love about this panel that we have today is that the application goes beyond what we normally think of STEAM in terms of, what an engineer does or how they use STEAM elements to do their job, but really talking about the social impact that STEAM can have. And so with that, I don't know, Rodolfo, if we have time to do a quick intro of the speakers, or if folks have information. I know you already have all of our bios. Should we just dive into these questions? What do you prefer?
No, I think that our bios are just on the chat, but put by the World Academy support. And I think that each panelist can just introduce himself or herself, just a short introduction that they can pass to the topic they like to discuss. I think
sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds perfect. Yeah, we can do that. Okay, so just a short 30-second introduction. So I myself, my name is Paula Garcia Todd. I am a chemical engineer. I've spent the last 18 years in the pharmaceutical space, but I'm heavily engaged with schools, very specifically on STEM and STEAM outreach activities. I'll pass it over to Sharita next.
Thanks for having me on this WAS panel. Let me know if my connection is not working and I might have to reconnect via another way, because I've been having a few difficulties. Again, my name is Sharita Castro, and I consider myself to be a social science researcher who deals in public policy with training in public health and social work at the intersection of trade and labor. So it requires a lot of creativity to pull all those disciplines together, but I've been working for the last 20 years to end child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you. Afua, I'll let you go next.
Thanks so much for having me today. My name is Afua Bruce. I'm currently the Chief Program Officer at Datakind, which is a nonprofit that uses data science and AI to help other nonprofits and government agencies really execute their mission. I consider myself to be a public interest technologist. I've spent most of my career really working at the intersection of technology, policy, and communities. And so it's that interdisciplinary nature, that interdisciplinary perspective that I bring to all of my work, and I'm excited to chat about in today's conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Whittle, you're up.
Thank you very much. I'm a computer engineer involved in building, developing new classes of memories. My research is in cognitive systems now, and we building various things for space in extreme environments. I was also vice president for education in the largest technical organizations, it's the IEEE. It's 430,000 members. Those issues were central and focal and strategic to the development of that organization. There is lots of skill, many of opportunities, but the bottom line why I'm here today is we are still working on STEM. STEAM is hard. STEM for me is like stem cells. Fundamental to all of the developments, but stem cells die without its environment. Steam provides the power, that gluing force. So that will be my perspective today, how we could implement it, not think about it, but it starts from thinking. That A provides, as you mentioned, the responsibility, the sense of the environment, the sense of coexisting and co-evolving life. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so before we start getting into the real detailed, information to share here, I wanted to talk about, how do we'll integrate, how do we integrate this in the classroom? But I'd like to better understand how these disciplines are integrated in the real world. So I'd love to understand some examples, either through personal experiences, careers, studies that you've encountered that beautifully bring together STEAM and humanity, and what is the impact of these partnerships? I'll let anyone pop in.
I'm happy to kick us off today. So as I said, I work at a nonprofit organization that really harnesses the power of data science and AI in service of humanity. So super intrigued by your prompt. And so, as I look at how we integrate technology, or specifically in this case, data science and AI for that humanity perspective, it really all comes back to how do we center communities? How are we thinking about the needs of communities? How are we defining the communities that we serve? And then how are we making sure that the technology that's out there and that's been developed is getting into the hands of people to actually improve life and help improve agency for those communities? So a couple of the projects that I find especially interesting that Datakind has done that really speaks to this is we partnered with an organization in Haiti about a year and a half ago, that delivered sanitation devices, toilets essentially to Haiti. And they had a complicated distribution route that they were using to deliver those. So we partnered with them to look at all the data available on the ground and figure out how to create a route optimization algorithm that anyone could pick up. It didn't have to be an experienced driver or one who's familiar with it. They could pick that up. They could get instructions in the ways that were best for them, whether it be a text or some other form, and they could make the best delivery routes. And that organization then reported that because of the algorithm we developed, they saw a 13% decrease in their fuel consumption, which, given the cost of fuel and the time, right, that's a huge savings for that organization. And so really, when you talk about impact and you talk about combining sort of the STEM disciplines with sort of the creativity of really saying what actually needs to be done here, what actually needs to be developed, and then that real impact of people getting the sanitation devices they need and organizations saving time and money so they can operate more efficiently. I think that's one sort of real world example of how we were able to bring all aspects together.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, happy to jump in.
Yes, please.
Okay, so for me, it's been a privilege to shape policies and programs in an evidence-based manner to address child labor and forced labor. And I think what drew me into the field of research, specifically social science research, was this deep understanding that data can truly change the world. It can inform and transform how we treat each other as human beings and show how we fulfill or fail at that social contract we have with one another. And I think, for me, there was many things that pulled me into the field of research, But the one guiding star was the principle that all children should grow up with love and opportunities to have their dreams come true. And I was able to be part of a community of scientists who believed that if we can measure it, we can help raise awareness, develop policies, and change it. And so when I was coming up in the field in 1995, researchers came together to measure child labor. They used first a representative sample of perhaps 5 countries to develop what they called a global estimate, on child labor. But the idea was like, while it could have it received criticism, you had to start somewhere. And in that starting and experimenting and putting a number out there, over the years, 90 national child labor surveys were able to be administered with the help of the International Labor Organization, funding from the US government, to have more precise estimates on how to tackle child labor. And so over the last 20 years, our field was able to see a decline by 30%. And sadly, these last global estimates that came up, child labor actually increased by 8 million. So it provides a guidepost about how we as scientists contribute to taking care of each other in the world, especially children. Thanks.
Okay. Paula, those kind of considerations just let me put me in a state of remembering what I am from Politecnico of Milano, and so I maybe I put on the table a few experiences that we shared a few years ago. For instance, for crowd mapping, to give you an example, how people, everyday people can have a collaboration with university. And so we used, for instance, Google Mapping for the Milano area. And then now we have high technological tools that are our smartphones. So we asked a group of students just to go around and put their information on Google Map on local stores. So you have an example of integration of collaboration from university and everyday people, because they were just students going around with their smartphones and just writing down, what they, for instance, considered important to put on the map. And so in that way, we were able to have a more detailed information on that area. And that is just a simple example of opening up the university landscape with the connection to everyday life. The second one is completely different, because a year ago we started an experiment at the university at Politecnico Milan, and we started a new area that is an area that is taking into consideration philosophers and sociologists, and they created a group called Meta, and they started with seminars on epistemology and sociology, and then try to let engineers, chemical people, technical people, just try to talk to one another with the sociologists and philosophers, and then they use that experience to create startups in research groups with some one constraint, that you can have a startup, but you have in the research group you have to take a philosopher, one philosopher or one sociologist with you in the research group, integrated together. And this experiment started a year ago, and now I'm quite curious to see the results, because they started writing a lot of papers, putting on the journals, with all the bibliographical references or something like that. But I think that I mean it's something very advanced for standard university, right now. But that is just for me is a little example, because as I said before, we have to enlarge our panorama, and that's the point. I mean, STEAM for me is or the shift from STEM to STEAM is just an opportunity to rethink the way we capture knowledge from experience, because we have to understand that our learning is experiential, and we need experiential and dictionary, both of them are the same way to be able to communicate. We have to develop a common language, but the common language by itself is nothing if we don't share the same experiences. Because because we need to give the same meaning to the same words.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, Witold, do you have
just to follow up exactly on the previous experiences, I want to share 8 experiences very, very briefly, so highlights only. 8 because I had quite a few years to actually practice it. All my life was to share. Now I have grandchildren. And they're growing too. I'm growing with them. So it is the process of coexistence and co-learning, of finding what we already know and sharing with possibility of finding and discovering the new that we did not see before. It is removing the blindness or getting better glasses so that we could see in focus. So one of the first one, maybe 50 years ago, I established a mini university for primary school students and developed some programs. But it was a coexistence of all of the not mono university, it's the multi-university and trans-university to discovery in a very fertile ground of what could be. And there are tremendous experiences from it. So mini university. My son was called Mini U, not by his name, because he had a T-shirt, and he started acting probably like that. The other component was much more serious. I started building when we knew and the environment was very good. We started calling students from high schools to come to our space camps. We built rockets, launched rockets, built all of the elements of realizing that out there is no air, we can't breathe. Out there is radiation that kills. We have developed experiments with tardigrades, for example, those animals that have 6 lives. They can survive 5,000 radiation 5,000 times stronger than we could. Our cells would fall apart. They don't. The question was why? What is happening over here? Is nature really defined by our cells, or are there alternatives? And how to see the alternatives, how to see the depth of nature already. Another most important probably event is I spent most of my life helping indigenous students that normally see themselves as worth nothing. Those words came to me so hard, so many times, that I knew I could not sit and pay attention to people, to students whose parents could provide everything or many things. So we had a professor, indigenous professor, who got lots of money, established a foundation, and we started with 4 students. Today we have 150. 6 universities are involved. It is the Discovery Week that I call it. They go to medicine, to zoology, to engineering, and we also build robots that can be done by them, can go and things. I've been working very, very hard. One of our provinces in the north is called Nunavut. It's an indigenous province. We had no interest in engineering. After one of those discovery weeks, there was a paraplegic type of a student who came and discovered herself. She had to, when she presented to the whole university, she said, everybody told me I was worth nothing. And that was the last time that I would agree with that. Now I know. The next year, we had 30 students from her province joining in the University of Manitoba, the place where I am. So the miracles do happen because of those activities, because of STEAM, not only STEM. There are many other things. Women in science and engineering, we are reaching through that organization 53,000 students each year in a single province. So those are that's the power of presence and doing the right things. And then, since my time is limited, I will then zoom on two things. One is radio. I'm a ham radio operator from the time when that's how students from a university could talk to their parents. There was no telephone. Telephones were too expensive. I taught how to do that even in Morse code because that was the fastest way, the cheapest way. And I built a radio transmitter one could really carry in the pocket and a keyer that could really be used, and it almost no power could reach New Zealand and China and Russia. So those are the things that can be done. Those are the things that people discover, not only science and technology, but the connectivity, connecting with others, connecting in a way that STEM cannot provide. And the last one, we have developed now a low Earth orbit satellites and systems group that is working towards now engaging universities, engaging in competitions, colleges and high schools. We've developed now 6 generations of satellites, and the 5th and 6th high school students are now involved. Why? Because in the previous generation, teachers learned how to do it. I cannot be everywhere, but we can be with those leaders. And this session is about leadership in STEAM. So it is the infecting others with the zest of learning, with the and the desire to share their abilities to entice this. I call it the 10th Sputnik 1 moment, where we knew something special has happened. And students are eager. The smiles when they discover something overshadow any difficulty, any number of hours we have to put into capturing their hearts and minds. Or let's reverse it, minds. But without the hearts, what do we have? So that's a sharing of experience, my hands-on experience. And then, as Rodolfo mentioned, this is the experiential learning. It is not that I put Maxwell's equations and explain them fully. I do that, even in those outreach activities, those connectivity activity, not only in my classroom. But it is the other component that brings that smile that lasts almost forever, from that crib to the last handshake or the last smile that we can give.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That That segues really well into the next question that I had, which is really talking about all these real world applications that we're talking about and how do we bring them into classrooms. So I think you had some wonderful examples in there. I'd love to hear from any other panelists, what are other ways that you can connect these career paths or these STEAM principles into the classroom? And since Witold, you kind of went into this as well, I'd love to also hear any thoughts about how do we better include underrepresented students into STEAM as well? Like, what are other ways that we can really engage with those students to consider STEAM?
Maybe just answer very quickly. One of the most difficult components in engaging Indigenous students is homesickness. Moving to other places may last only for a day or two. We have to now develop an infrastructure, the new environment, the new ecosystem that would be supportive. So we've also included now chaperones, people from their families who come with them. And you can see what happens. Not only the students learn, but their families. It is not what the student says or shows, but now what the individuals who care for the individual students can do. So it is no longer in isolation, sending someone to a school. And to the best teacher on the planet will not do it, because in a day, in my case even 6 hours, we had to fly the individual back, because they could not survive. They cried rather than participate and smiled. So it is an ecosystem that we have to develop. In my slides, that will be addressed as a fundamental issue. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Any other panelists? Any other thoughts?
I'm happy to build on that a little. And I think one of the things that you can do to really connect to students is to ask them what they're interested in, right? When I go into classrooms and have these conversations, I might start with a little bit of background about myself, but then really ask the students for what are you seeing in your own world? What are you seeing that you want to change in the world? What do you like to think about? What do you like to dream about? And then from there, we can figure out what sort of STEAM specific tools you have, but just getting students to, instead of focus on sort of the particular tool that they're going to use to solve the problem, what the actual problems are that they're trying to meet. And I think when you start from there, then you can have more engaging conversations. Then you can help students develop projects that they're excited about, that they want to do, that they want to spend their time on. And then they'll learn the science or the technology or the art or the engineering or the math skills that they really need to bring to bear for that problem. There's an organization in North Carolina, I'm forgetting the particular city, called Code the Dream, that does this really well. They tend to work with mostly adults, but they really seek to bring in people who are from historically underrepresented or overlooked communities and teach them technical skills, but also say, what are the problems that you're looking to solve? And so that's really led to people saying, I wonder if there's a way that we can build something that works with the state to figure out how we can automatically get people their driver's licenses back when they're eligible for something that pays outstanding fines. And then they can get their driver's license back in their hands, and then they can drive again, they can support their families, they can drive to a job, things like that. Or people who've come into that program who are from migrant farm worker communities who say, the problem that we're actually seeing is, how do people get services? How do people make sure there's clothing and food and more? And so now that that's the problem, what are the different tools that we can bring together to bring communities together, to serve communities, and to actually then get that food and that clothing to the people who need it in those migrant farm worker communities? So I think it really starts with having conversation with students, having conversations with people about what are the problems that you're seeing? What do you want to change? And then we can figure out the tools and techniques from there.
Yeah, I love that, because you're really starting with the heart. And then from the heart, you move into like true social impact using STEAM. So that's amazing. Sharita, did you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Paula. I'd like to share a few things as well, just coming from, lived experience. And, if you were to have told my mother when I was in elementary school that her daughter would be one of the inaugural If Then STEM ambassador, she would have laughed. She's like, but she just likes to play. And, you know, I think, so in honor of today, I'm wearing these hearts as you all talk about connecting with the heart, because, you know, I grew up with various things around me and messages. And it's funny because when I was growing up, I remember I just loved to draw hearts. And at one point, one of the teachers sort of offered this challenge. She's like, well, maybe you can draw your name and not draw hearts anymore. And I remember it was my first, I guess, my first form of resistance. And I studied my name. I actually hadn't fully studied my name until I was like in the 3rd grade. And I was like, I'm going to show her. My name means charitable. I'm going to draw hearts everywhere. But I think there were like these two parallel paths of, you know, I grew up actually in a family because whether it was poverty, instability, that one way out is that you will go through to the sciences. And so, of course, whenever your parents tell you to do something, you want to run the other way. And so I think other messages I was hearing was that, oh, Sharita is the playful one. She doesn't really, she's not studious. And, you know, I kind of believed that, or was like a happy-go-lucky, but the reality is that science was taught in a way, you know, in terms of physical sciences, but sort of devoid from the human aspect. Like, what can science do? How can you use science to actually help humanity? And I think that when a teacher, one of my college, not just my college professors, but one, it was my 7th grade high school teacher. She made learning fun. And I remember just that fun in the learning made me want to do better in class because I also wanted to please her. But then, you know, as I came along and I had other women educators in my life who connected the science aspect, the quantitative, hard sciences, statistics, to here's how you can help humanity. That's kind of what brought me along. And I think one of the things that I just kind of want to share or challenge is that we talk about you know, as in the art aspect, as is the experience of STEM is not art in and of itself, right? Like, I went for this panel and I looked at what is the definition of art. And it's like a visual object or experience consciously created through an expression of skill or imagination. And so this is just to say that we like to put artists in one box, scientists in one box, but scientists are artists. And part of it is like, how do we bring that creativity and learning to life in a way that engages the heart and the soul? Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we've covered a lot. We're running short on time. I'm going to move into my last question. And the way that I've pulled my last question together is based on a recent NSF study that showed that there are certain aspects or certain elements of STEM education that absolutely need to be incorporated into classrooms for various reasons. And as I was reading through this research, it really struck me that these are really critical in bringing together STEAM and humanity, as we've been talking about here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of these elements and I'm going to go ahead and define it for the audience. And then I'd love to hear your take of the importance of having this being taught into a classroom setting and the potential impact that it has in really pulling together STEAM and humanity. Okay, so I'm going to start with data literacy, which I think a couple of the panelists, actually all of the panelists would agree, very important in their fields, right? And so data literacy is defined as the ability to identify, collect, evaluate, analyze, interpret, and communicate data. So what do you think is the impact and the importance of data literacy in integrating STEAM and humanity?
So one of my mentors used to say that behind every number is a name, and behind every name is a story. And I think about that a lot in the data work that I do, right? You're always looking at all these tables of different numbers. You're looking at what's the different data you're thinking about. Is this data representative? Is it inclusive? Is it exhaustive? Have we over collected data? But and then, you use all of that to maybe do some predictive analysis, or to make some recommendations, or to draw some type of analysis or recommendations from that data. And I often try and remind myself that for all of these numbers that I'm looking at, all of these words that I'm looking at, whatever that data is looking at, that really it's all representative of people with stories and lives. And it's really just trying to connect to that, and back to the conversation we're having about connecting the heart to the science. That's what it's all about. So that for me is the data literacy to humanities connection.
Very impactful. Thank you. Yes, Witold.
Oh, Afua's statement was so beautiful that I almost started crying over here, because this is the core of what we want to accomplish. It is that finding the forces that bind us, not divide us, something that is beyond everything. That's the meta understanding of it. Now, without data, coming back to exactly the point that you made, we are almost nothing, because we would be blind. We will live, but we don't know where we are going, and we will hit more obstacles than we would like to for our well-being. So the well-being depends on the data. I teach how to acquire data correctly, how to translate the data from the environment here on the planet and in space to collect them, transmit without too many errors, then collect them somewhere in the oceans, data oceans and data lakes and the data transformations and the transformers, and then start analyzing. But as Rodolfo very often said, our data analysis is based on statistical sense and statistics. Statistics rely now on frequency. So that's the frequentist type of an approach. If something is very frequent, say in language, or we say it will appear everywhere, but what does it mean? The meaning is that specific frequentist approach and statistical approach is void of meaning. The semantics is lost. So we have to now look into more then, and say Bayesian analysis and the relational analysis is not sufficient either. We have to find now, and artificial intelligence as it is, not only is insufficient, but has led to the equating untruth with truth, one of the most dangerous evolutions in human beings, and due to disconnected science and technology and math, without the realization that our lives, our living, co-evolving living depends on the truth. Science is about searching and discriminating or discerning between truth and not so. But definitely falsehood and misinformation and disinformation. Today, we must get help in it. It has to move into patents. But patents themselves are not sufficient either. So we have to look about patents, and maybe even further, patents, wheels within wheels within wheels. Wheels, as you remember, the beautiful songs that have been created, story about the fools and clowns and others. So we have to see beyond statistics. We want to see beyond patterns that are obvious. Patterns based on frequency also are even more dangerous because falsehood becomes the most frequent thing that may occur in our lives. So data are absolutely, completely things, but data that are false will create even greater dangers to humanity. So we must now address this. So NSF and others have been working extremely hard in order to find ways of doing it, and that those ways do exist, but maybe we have to have new views, rethink how we could really fight disinformation. We are incapable of fighting. You can't be analyzing peta or exa type of bytes of data. Our brains are not capable of doing it, but we can see through. What does it mean, seeing through? This is now the level that goes beyond statistics.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to comment on what Witold has said, Paula and Rodolfo. Yeah, I just want to underscore some of the things that Witold has shared, and also Afua. You know, I come from a public policy perspective and also science. And so I think one of the greatest public policy challenges of our time, one of the greatest research challenges of our time is truly how to tackle misinformation, disinformation, and create a research agenda that advances STEM for good. And part of that is figuring out how we put people, whether it's people, our planet, democracy, over profit. And I come from a public policy training where, you know, we study the politics of data. And, you know, one of the pioneers in the field, Deborah Stone, in talking about policy paradox and talking about how there are no neutral facts. You know, every piece of data has a judgment about how do you measure, how do you analyze. And I think that part of the education in data literacy that needs to be integrated into classrooms is, so going back to the question of data literacy, that it is essential that statistics, data literacy, you know, to foster constructive critical thinking exists within a classroom. And part of that critical thinking has to couple STEM with our history. And the history of colonialism, the history of slavery, all of these dark histories that people are not wanting to think about. So just kind of wanting to make a plug to pair STEM and history as we foster data literacy. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, those were all very insightful comments. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to go to another aspect that came out of this research. And Rodolfo, when you talked about your examples, this one really kind of reminded me of this one. So I'm going to mention this one, which is dynamic interdisciplinary teaming, which is defined as the ability to function in and contribute to a variety of teamed groups, the ability to collaboratively set common goals and progress towards them, the ability to contribute expertise and learn from others, the ability to learn from and work within a global context, unrestricted by geography and respectful of diversity. What are your thoughts on that particular element, the importance, the impact in a classroom, especially when it comes to STEAM in the humanities?
May add just a few lines, because I think that we have to be aware of a further distinction, because when we talk about data literacy, usually your mind go immediately to computers. But again, we have to make a distinction, and if you like, you can refer to Nora Bateson, to Nora Bateson blog. Just Google Nora Bateson blog, and you go there and look at an article, a fantastic article on talking on warm data. I mean, organisms, living organisms, are just, you know, very different from machines, from computers. And so they use warm data. They process your warm data, not just, you know, cold data like you can find on computers. And so, for instance, the example that I gave you of in technical people dealing with philosopher and sociologists was just the right opportunity to let them realize the difference between cold data and warm data. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. That ties both of them together. Absolutely. Any other thoughts about, really working in an interdisciplinary team and getting effective use out of that team?
Paula?
Yes.
The reason I selected the hardest of all of the environments, space, building a satellite, is the most important lesson I've learned is that I know quite a lot, I think I know quite a lot, but there is not a chance that I could build that structure, that system by myself. Not a chance. If I would ask mechanical engineers, not a chance. If we'll ask now scientists, mathematicians, not a chance. We need 16 disciplines, 16, to build a satellite. All of them thought initially that they could build by themselves. That idea of now involving many students. I had 130 students in the first generation of the satellite. They just came because it was so exciting. It was the Sputnik type moment. They knew that something could be done that could not be done otherwise. And then they also learned within days, not months, that we need one another. Not because it is better to be two. If one gets sick, the other doesn't. No. Each and everybody was needed. This was the example where experience revealed the truth of our living. We are not single cell. We are not two cells. For us to do that discussion, we need many cells. And also not just cells acting in isolation, cooperating, being together, becoming one organism. And then that team does the beautiful things that could happen. So there are many examples that STEAM, no longer STEM, is needed to bring everybody to that recognition. And again, such projects do not distinguish between color of the skin, religion, observations, views. If they're too distinct, they vanish, they move to other things. It is really that gluing force that can help us in getting into that focus. So complex problems teach us about complexity. That complex engagement teaches us how we must interact to survive together with all of our differences, with all of the changes that we would like to make instantly. No, we are dynamical systems, non-linear, interacting not only within ourselves, but among ourselves in a non-linear fashion. But any smile that I see impacts everything I do. Every tear that I see impacts what I do. It is definitely non-linear. I can write equations, but it is then involves our very fundamental being. And then such projects, togetherness teaches us how to have hope, and how the realization in the philosophy of, say, Tikkun Olam, it is how to be to improve, how to have the strength to survive the multitude of tears and the pain that we observe each day. That's my observation over here. I probably won't be able to show you all of the slides, but that's okay.
No, it's a great response because it also hits into this concept of systems thinking, of not just working together in an interdisciplinary manner, but also how the pieces connect and affect each other, which is very important. So thank you for bringing that to light as well.
And what the impact of it is, not just theoretical, practical. We know then that we need one another. Not that I have to have a gun to assert my dominance over you or anybody.
Paula and Whittle, can I share a story just when we're talking about the practicality of disciplines? And I think it's true, you know, when we're tackling a subject, we often need various disciplines, and that's what makes it stronger. You know, where there's diversity in disciplines, diversity in lived experience. And, you know, in tackling child labor, we need lawyers, social workers, economists. And so I just want to share a story where we were trying to collect data to assess if there was forced labor in a particular industry. And I was speaking to a lawyer. And I said, well, do you know if the study and the process was random? Like, was it a random sample? And the lawyer kept telling me, oh, yeah, it was random. Like, we went here, we went there, we went there. And I was like, no. Like, and so I tried to describe the process of random. And then I realized, oh my gosh, this, our training on quantitative methods and what is random and non-random, you realize we don't have that shared language. And I think oftentimes, like, you know, Whittle said, as we are connected, part of it is making sure we have a shared language, but then also respecting the disciplines for where we come from, but then also coming together. Because even in, you know, economists and quantitatives, we're like, oh, what does logit mean? What does probit mean? But in the end, it's like, okay, what are we trying to show? What are we trying to accomplish? And how do we get together to have this shared language to accomplish that same goal?
Yeah, that's a great story to share. Yes, I think we've all had moments like that and we can relate. So I see we're coming down to time. So Afua, did you have any lasting words or anything on any of the topics we've covered that you wanted to add on to?
I think the only thing that I would close with is just echoing actually things that have already been said multiple times in different ways on the panel, is just that in order to really solve for the solutions that we need for today and certainly for the future, for some of the biggest challenges we're facing across humanity, it is an interdisciplinary approach, and focusing on specific disciplines, even science, technology, engineering, and math versus art, or different disciplines of science or different disciplines of engineering. You know, we can sort of set those aside because it's really going to take an interdisciplinary approach, perspectives from multiple different angles to really work together and solve the challenges that really affect the heart of the matter and its people's lives.
Thank you so much. I think that was a wonderful summary of exactly what we discussed today. So thank you so much. I would love to thank all of our panelists today, all of the attendees for listening in. Rodolfo, thanks again for creating the space to allow these conversations to happen through the World Academy of Art and Science. Thank you so much. Do you have any other comments to add, Rodolfo?
Well, for closing, I think that we have to create educational ecosystems that able to inspire students and be inspired by them at the same time, and not just an environment where they are just trying to get into, just to get a certificate, something like that. And so an inclusive education, helping them to understand who they really are, where they want to go, what they want to achieve in their lifetime. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so we are at time. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.